Welcome to the CSS Basics section. So far, we have used HTML to put content on our web page. Now, we'll use some basic CSS to actually style that content to make it look the way we want it. After this section, you will be able to build a simple layout with some formatted content. We will continue to work on this simple blog post web page that I showed you before. So we will add some more content, build a simple layout, and style the whole thing. After this section, we will be ready to start on our killer website project. So, what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. CSS defines exactly how HTML elements should look. It allows us to make a clear separation between content and style. HTML is the content and CSS is the style. These two images show the exact same HTML, with the only difference that the website on the left side has not been formatted with CSS yet. It's just bare HTML, which doesn't look very good, of course. So how are we going to use CSS in practice? There are three ways to use CSS. First, we can write CSS code right inside an HTML tag using the style attribute. Second, we can write CSS code in the head section of an HTML document. And third, CSS code can be put into an external file. And this is what we're actually going to do. Remember what I said about how CSS allows us to separate content from style? That is why we'll put all our visual styles in a separate file, because it's a much cleaner solution and therefore everybody does it that way. So let's go back to brackets and do this. So let's start by creating a new file, just as we did before with the HTML file. So File, New, and then save it with Command S or Control S, and I will call it style.css. Okay, that's it. You see? Now it appears here in our project folder. Now I'm going to go back to the HTML file, because now we have to tell the HTML file in which CSS file the new styles will be. So to link these two documents, we use the link tag in the HTML head. Just like this. Link. And this is another element which has no closing tag, so it's just link. I hope you remember HTML attributes, because we will use them right now. So to start, we tell the browser that we want to link a style sheet. This rel and style sheet. Then next, we tell the HTML document that it is a CSS file. And finally, with the href attribute we used before for our links, we tell the document where the CSS styles are. Style.css, which is the file we just created before. So I hit enter, and now these two documents are linked. Alright. Now we are ready to start writing some CSS. And let's do that in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to start to write CSS for text formatting, so you can see how CSS works. It's really easy. So, we'll jump right into the CSS file here to start write some code. CSS is written in rules. Each rule consists of a selector and a declaration block. To exemplify that, we'll start formatting the main heading. So h1 is the selector, because it will select all h1 elements. This means that all h1 elements will be formatted with the code we will write in the declaration block, here in curly brackets. So I will start with the text color. we will choose green in this example. So color, and I'll just write green. And then semicolon. And you see the H1 element actually changed its color to green. So to sum this up, the property here is color, and the value of that property here is the name green. Next, we want to change the text size, right? So just write font size, and brackets gives us some suggestions as we write. And now I will choose just 40 pixels. You see, it changed. Maybe 50 pixels. No, 40 pixels was better. You see, we are already designing in the browser. We're changing the values of the attributes and see which looks best. Now suppose we wanted to change the font family. Let's say to Helvetica New. Let's do that. It's font family, right? And now just type Helvetica New. And again, the H1 element changed its family. Now, if that font is not available on your system, which is likely if you're on Windows, let's tell the browser it should use Arial instead. And to do so, we just write Arial after a comma here. And then the semicolon, as before. So Helvetica is the first choice, and Arial is the second choice. And now let's go do the same thing for the H2 elements. We want them to look the same, but with a smaller font size. So let's copy this H1 rule and paste it down here and change this to H2. Now these two look exactly the same. The H1 looks exactly the same as the H2 elements down here, because for now we didn't change anything. So let's change this here to, let's say, 25, and that's a much better font size. Now we repeated some rules here. You see, the H1 and the H2 have the same color and same font family, and we should actually avoid that because repeating code is bad practice. Instead of repeating, we can just group the common rules together. This is something we will be doing a lot, so I'm just showing it to you. So I write H1 and H2 and the declaration block. So everything that is common here, I will cut and paste it up here. And the font family is also the same for these two. So, did you see what I did here? Now I can delete this from here because it's already declared here in the command declaration. Now let's quickly format the paragraphs. I will first go back to the HTML file and delete this random text we put here, just to see how strong and emphasize and underline works. As you can imagine, we'll use the P selector here. But I'll show you another bracket secret here. Instead of switching to the CSS file, you can edit CSS right here in the HTML file. Just click on the P tag and then hit Command E or Control E. Command E, and this opens a CSS editing section right here in this file. This is called Quick Edit. Now I hit New Rule. Now it automatically puts the P selector and the declaration block here for us. Okay, I want the font size to, let's say, 18 pixels. Great. And let's justify this text. And for that we use the text align property and set it to justify. Very well. We could also use right, center, or left, but we want to justify here. I will also adjust the font family. Do you remember how to do that? It is font family, and it was Helvetica, Newer, or as a second choice, Arial. Alright. Maybe you notice that the link text is still in the original format down here. Now we could go ahead and format the A tag, right? But I will show you a much better solution. So let's switch back to the CSS file. And at the beginning, I will add a rule for the body. And since everything is inside the body, this rule will apply to everything visible on a web page. So this means all elements that have no defined styles. So this is like a global rule. So body, and that's it. So the first thing, I can go ahead and copy the font family right into the body. Like this. Okay, now you see that everything has the Helvetica Newer font family, even the links which I didn't even style yet. If I delete this font family declaration down here for the P element, it still looks the same because we defined that everything inside the body will have Helvetica Newer as font family. And I will do the same thing with the font size. We'll cut it here, paste it here in the body. So the paragraph is back to the 18 pixels, but now the links are also with 18 pixels. Now the reason this works is because of CSS inheritance, which is a very important concept in CSS. We changed the font size in the body, and so the elements that are inside of the body inherit its style. So child elements inherit the properties from their parent elements, unless we override their styles, as we did right here in the H1 in H2. Sorry, in the H2 declarations. Alright, I think this was a good introduction to CSS code. So congratulations! You have created some nice clean CSS code here, without repetitions, and have made the text look pretty good for now. Isn't that great? Now this was a lot of stuff to absorb, so feel free to go through it again and make sure you understand exactly what we did, because it's very important that you understand everything from here, because from now we will use these concepts for the next lectures. Let's talk about colors in CSS. In CSS, colors are displayed combining red, green, and blue light. This is the RGB model. In the RGB model, each color is defined by a combination of red, green, and blue using a hexadecimal notation. The lowest value for each color is 0, which is 0 in hexadecimal, and the highest value is 255, which is FF in hexadecimal. So, for instance, a complete red has FF, which is the highest value in the red channel, and 0 in the green and the blue channel. Yellow is a mixture of red and green, so it has FF in the red and in the green channel, but 0 in the blue channel. You get the idea, right? You can just pause the video and look at the RGB model if you want to analyze all colors there. So, by mixing red, green and blue together using different values between 0 and 255, we can obtain over 16 million colors. For instance, this nice green is represented with this hexadecimal code 1DA717. So we have 1D for red, A7 for green and 17 for blue. Mixing these together makes this nice green. But don't worry so much about these numbers, because picking our colors in brackets will be very easy. And for gray colors, just make red, green and blue take the same value. For instance, 8B, 8B, 8B gives us that first shade of gray we see here. If all 6 values in a hex code are the same, like 555, 555, we simply write 555. Now one last thing. CSS colors can also have transparencies. If we want colors with transparencies, we do not use the hexadecimal notation. Instead, we write them like you can see on the green square. This gives us the same green we saw before, but with 75% transparency. So, I will now show you how all of this works in brackets. Back to the CSS file of our project, let's try to change that green color of the headings we defined before, because we will actually never use color names like green as we did in the last lecture. So, put the cursor here on this color and then hit Command E, just as we did before in the HTML file. But this time it's not a CSS editor which comes up, but this nice color picker. So this is a pretty powerful color picker. You can click everywhere around here to choose the color. And you actually can see the color changing in our web page. We can also use these sliders here to change the color hue and transparency. So here I can change the color. If you wanted a yellow color, blue color, I don't know. So we can choose anything right here. And with this slider, we can adjust the transparency. As we saw before, this now is this RGBA notation, and here we have the transparency value. Now I will just put this back up to 100% and change to the hexadecimal notation that I showed you before. So you can play around with these colors as you wish. I will just choose some nice green for our headings. Well, maybe this one. So now I will close this, and now we have a beautiful green color for all our headings. Another thing, I will go to the picker again. Now if we push this all the way to this side, we have actually all the shades of gray, from complete white, which is FFF, all the way down to black, which is 000. So if we move up and down here, we can choose a gray color. But as I said, what I want is a green color. So just put it here. And here bracket even shows us the colors we use the most in our design. This can be pretty useful if you use multiple colors. Alright, so let me close this color picker, and I think that's it for now with colors. So now you know how to work with colors in CSS. See you in the next lecture. Now that we're familiar with colors, we are going to talk about two new selectors, classes and IDs. In the last lecture, we used H1, H2, P, and body selectors to select the corresponding HTML elements. But now, suppose we wanted to style only one of the paragraphs, not all of them. That's why we have classes and IDs. we can attribute class or ID names to elements and then use these classes or IDs to select them in the CSS code. So let's do that. First, I need to tell you that the same class can be attributed to as many elements as you like, while an ID can be used only once inside each HTML document. So let's see what we can do here. So we have 3 paragraph elements, if you remember. It's this paragraph here, and also the author name is also a paragraph. So now let's say we want the author paragraph to be bigger than the main text. So we have 2 text paragraphs and we can use classes for that. So let's go back to our index HTML file. Let's just close this. And so here in the p tag, just add class, and then choose a name. It can be anything. I will call this main text. And then the same thing with this second paragraph. This is also main text, right? So main text. Now there's only one paragraph for the author name, so we can use an ID here. So it's just, as you can imagine, ID, and I will call it author text. And now let's go back to our CSS file. And here down here we can now add the new selectors. So to style the paragraphs with the main text class, we'll add dot main text. And you see on our web page with this live connection to brackets that there's like a blue square around this paragraph and the other one too, but not the author paragraph. So which means that we selected these 2 elements. So what I can do here is to say that we want these paragraphs to have a justified text align. Text align justify. And now down here we have the author paragraph, if you remember, and it's an ID. And to select that ID we use the hash symbol and say author text. Alright, and as we said, we want this to have a larger font size, like 22 pixels maybe. Font size, we'll set it to 22 pixels. And you see, it's bigger now. And yeah, 22 pixels looks just right. So nice, it works. I actually don't need this one anymore, it's kind of redundant, because in this rule I already said that I want these 2 paragraphs to be justified. And since this one doesn't need to be justified, I can just delete this and nothing will happen. Just clear some lines, save it, never forget to save. And yeah, I think that's it for the coding. Now using IDs is actually not a good practice because, as I said, they can only be used once. So usually we use classes for all our styling, even if we have only one class with a specific name, because we will never know what will happen to our code down the road. So let's just quickly change from ID to class right here first. So I want this to be a class, and then I will also change it in the CSS, and now it's back to normal as we want it. Great! This was an important lecture because we'll be using classes all the time. Next up, I will teach you another very important thing in CSS, the so-called box model. See you there. Welcome back. I will now quickly go over yet another very important concept in CSS, the box model. So, basically all HTML elements can be seen as boxes. What the box model does is to allow us to define space between elements and to add a border around elements. The box model consists of margins, padding, borders, and the actual content of the box, for instance, text. This image shows very well how the box model works. So, the content is where text and images appear. The padding is like a transparent area around the content, but inside of the box. The border of the box goes around the padding and the content and may be transparent or not. And finally, the margin is the space between boxes. Now, padding, margin, and border are properties in CSS and can be specified for the entire box or for individual sides, top, bottom, left, or right. We will use all of them later. The box model also allows us to set the height and the width of an element. Now, the annoying thing about the standard box model that I just showed you is that you just set the height and the width of the content, not of the entire box itself. This means that padding, margin, and border will be added to the height and width we specify, which is actually not what we want. But fortunately, we have a good solution for that. There is this very useful CSS property called box sizing. If we set box sizing to border box, the height and the width will be defined for the entire box. We will use this in a second. Because there is one last thing I need to tell you about the box model. In HTML, there are block elements and inline elements. Block elements use the full width of the browser and force line breaks. Headings and paragraphs are examples of block elements. And inline elements don't do any of that. For instance, images, links, strong and EM elements are all inline elements. What's important about them is that you can neither set their height or their width. But enough with theory lectures. Let's get our hands dirty with what we just learned and get back to brackets. As you can see on our web page, here in Google Chrome, there are already some margins between elements. For example, this one here and this one, it's all full of margins already. And that's because all browsers add some default margins if we don't specify any. So let's start by remove the default values. And to do that, we create some rules that will affect all elements on our web page using the asterisk selector, which goes like this. So we just type this. Now all elements are affected. That's why you have these blue boxes here around all the elements. This is a way of brackets showing us that all these elements are affected by this selector. Now here we set all margins and paddings to 0, and that's how it works. Just write margin 0 and also padding 0. So you see all the margins completely disappeared. Now, do you remember the box sizing property? We want to set it to border box for all elements, and this is the right place to do exactly that. So just write box sizing and then choose border box. Save it, and alright. So no margins and no paddings anymore. Now, I think we should add some margins to some of the elements. First, I would say that the main heading needs some margin, right? This main heading right here. So remember, margin is the white space between boxes. We want some margin between these two headings, the H1 and the H2 heading. So we add a margin bottom to the H1 element. So remember, I said we could specify the margins to all the sides of an element. And so now I will specify the margin at the bottom. And let's put 20 pixels here. That looks like a reasonable amount of white space here. And now the same thing for the secondary headings, because I also don't like that there's no space between the H2 element and the paragraphs. So it's again margin bottom, and here I think 10 pixels might be enough. Okay, that looks much better, don't you think? Finally, I would like to add some margin after the main paragraphs. So if you remember, the main paragraphs are this one and this one. And we defined that in the lecture before using this class here. So again, margin bottom, and let's say 20 pixels. So we get some nice spacing here. So it looks a little bit cleaner right now. And that's it for this lecture. I hope you learned a lot about the box model, which is really important. So if you didn't, just go back and look at it again, because in the next lecture we will really need it, because we will start to build a simple layout where we will use the concept that I showed you in this lecture. So, see you there. Hello, excited for a new lesson? I hope so, because this is going to be a long one. Now that we know how the box model works, let's build a simple layout for our blog page. This is where all the fun begins. We want a layout just like this one. So we want a box with our main content, a box for the author info, and a box to show what other blog posts are on our blog. We will start by putting all the content we have so far inside a container and center that container on a web page, like most of the websites you use every day do. We will do that by using the div element, which we have not talked about yet. The div element is one of the most used elements. Div stands for divide, and so we use it simply to divide our page into sections by creating boxes where we put our contents in. So let's wrap all the content we have so far inside a div element. Starting right here, just write div. Some space, and I'll copy everything, all the content we have so far. I will cut it and paste it right here. Now I need to indent this code by using the tab key. I will show you in a second, so that the code looks much better and is easier to read with these indents. So HTML is the first level, that is the second level, that's the third level, and everything inside the div is the fourth level. And then third level, second level, first level. So now let's call this div container. So container. And like I showed you before, we will use Command E, this time with the cursor on this class name. Command E, and then we will make a new rule for this class. So the class selector and the name of the class container, and now we can write our styles for this class. First, I will define the width of this, and I will use 1140 pixels as a width. The standard width has been 960 pixels for a long time, but as screens are getting larger and larger, we can also make wider web pages. So let me just make these windows bigger so we can see what's happening here. And now we want this container to be centered in the window, not all the way to the left. So let's go back to brackets and do that. And it's actually easier than it sounds. In order to do that, we have to define the left and the right margin of the container to be auto. Margin left, auto, and margin right, auto. And the auto means that the left and right margin are adjusted automatically according to the context of the element, which is the browser window in this case. So let's see what happened. So now, like magic, the website is centered. Now even if I adjust the browser window, our content always stays centered. You see? Now let's go back and create those 3 boxes that we saw earlier. Again, we use the div element to do that. Div, and I will call the first one blog post and close this. So instead of copying all the content, I will just delete this closing tag and put it where we want it to be. And it's down here, you see? Because here is the part where the author begins and everything above it is the blog post. And brackets automatically closes that for us. And now again, let's indent this code so that it's easier to read. Just like this. Now below this, I'll create the container for the other blog posts, which will be the green box if you remember it. So div class other posts. It's a great name for this, I think. Now we'll just put some dummy text here for now. And finally, the box for the author. Div class author box. Don't want this here. Okay, now indent the code and save it. Never forget to save. So let's just give them different background colors so we can see on a web page what's going on. Again, I will hit Command E because that's the easiest way instead of switching back and forth between HTML and CSS files. So in order to specify a background color, it's very easy. Just write background color and then choose a color. Well, if you remember from our color lecture, blue is red 0, green 0, and blue FF. Okay, let's close this. Blog post, now the other posts. New rule for this one. And now again, background color. This one is green, so 0 for red, FF for green, and 0 for blue. If you put the cursor on this color, we can actually see it. Yeah, it's green, as we want it. And now the author box. Let's define a style for this one. Background color, we want it yellow. So it's FF for red, FF for green, and 0 for blue. So yellow. We'll close these ones, and now let's check our web page again. So blue is the first box, green is the second box, and yellow is the third box. Now I want the width of the actual blog post to be 75% of the container and the other blog post section to be 25%. And that's very easy. So the blog post, we just need to say width 75%, blog post, and the other posts, Command E, width 25%. So you see, we cannot use only pixels to define measures, but also percentages, which will become very handy later on. Now it's 75%, and that's just 25% here, the green box. Now, to put the green box beside the blue box, as we want it for a layout, we need to use a new property called float. And this is very important. With float, an element can be pushed to the left or to the right, allowing other elements to wrap around it. So if we define the float property for the blue and for the green box as left, the two boxes will be side by side. So let's do that. We'll start down here. Float left. And the blue box also float left. So let's see what this looks like. Great, these two boxes are side by side now. Now the problem is, the yellow box is also up here where we don't want it. To avoid this, we got to use a clear property, which is like the counterpart to float. And I'm actually going to do this in a very specific way. So please just copy the CSS code I'm going to write here, because it's not important that you understand it at this point. I will use the very usual clear fix class. Just write clear fix after. Again, it's not important that you understand what I'm writing here right now. We will just use this class. And clear both. Save. So now after the green box, let's just add an empty div with the clear fix class. This may look a little strange to you now, but don't worry. We will see how to use this later. Clear fix. Okay, now it should work. Yeah, that's it. Now we see that the yellow class is down here as we wanted. So we have these two boxes side by side with the float property, and then we used the clear property in that strange clear fix class to clear the float so that this box can be right under these two boxes. And now let's just add some margins and paddings. You see the blue box and the green box here are way too close together. So we can add paddings to those boxes. So I will just go back. Now I will actually use a CSS file again. So you see all those classes we created inside the HTML file. Brackets put those down here at the end of the CSS document. The container, the blog post, the other posts, and the author box. Now let's just add a padding to the right side of the blog post. If you remember, padding is like a white space inside the box. We'll just say padding right, let's say 30 pixels. Okay, let's see. So you see this space here, but still inside the box, so it's still blue. And that will give us a nice spacing between those two boxes. Now we should also put a little margin between the top of the container and the browser window. So to give it a nice spacing between the beginning of the browser window here, and the beginning of the content. That's easy. The easiest way may be in the container element. If we set the margin top of the container to, let's say, 20 pixels, then we have this nice spacing all the way up here. Okay, now let's just get rid of those ugly background colors. We just used them so we could see the boxes while we were working on them. Now, maybe you see here in the container declaration block that we have these three margins: margin left, margin right, and margin top. There's actually a cleaner way of doing this, and I will just show you how. You can just write margin, and then we specify the 4 possible margins in this shorthand property. So this goes like: the top margin is the first. I will just write it here so you can see it. It's top is the first, then the right, then bottom, and then left. So the top bottom we want to be 20 pixels, right? Then the right is auto, the bottom is 0 because we don't have any margin at the bottom, and left is auto again. So this short declaration here does the exact same thing as this. Just remember, it's margin top, right, bottom, and left. So I can just delete it and things will look exactly the same. So all the margins are still there, and as you see, these ugly background colors are also gone. Another cool thing we could do is to add like a gray line here to separate the author box from the 2 boxes above them. So let's just go back to the author box, and we'll use a border property. And this border property allows you to do 3 things: the border width, the line type, and the color. So just write border and top because we want it to be at the top of the box, and then say 1 pixel width, and we want it to be solid, so just a normal solid line, and then a nice gray color. Remember how to do a gray color? You just have to put the same value on the 3 R, G, and B channels. Let's say 333. And then with our color picker, Command E, then we can just adjust it and use another different gray. So maybe this one here, I don't know. Alright, save it. And here we go. Here we have this nice gray line. And we probably also want some padding here, so that all this content is not just glued right to the top of this div element. So let's also define some padding at the top. Let's say 20 pixels. These numbers are not important at this stage because, you know, we're just trying out some things here. Alright, so you see, now we have this nice padding here. So, alright, I think we're pretty much done with our layout here. So we used float and clear in order to put all our layout boxes where we wanted them, and we used padding and margin to create some distances between the boxes, and that's essentially all you need in order to build some layouts. So in the next lecture we'll just improve some things here on our website in order to make it look a little bit better and to teach you some more techniques that you can use. Alright, so see you there. So in the last lecture we built a very simple layout using float, clear, margins and paddings. Now it's time to polish our blog post website a little bit. So let's go do that. Okay, we just need to finish some things here, like putting some content in this right column and also make the author section a little more beautiful, you know. And that's what we'll do now. So I'll put some content here in this box, and to do so I go back to the HTML file and to the other posts, which is empty for now. So let's say we want 3 other blog posts here. So I create simply 3 new divs and call them maybe just other, and put some name in here, the first other blog post. Now we'll do this 3 times. It's just so that that box isn't completely empty, you know. So yet another blog post, and maybe the best post ever. Read this. Now I just want to format those. So Command E again and new rule, and let's say we want a margin bottom of 40 pixels, which means a distance between those boxes of 40 pixels. So this is what it looks like. It's not beautiful, but you know, it's there. And the cool thing is we know how to put it there. So let's just close this again, and let's talk about the author box down here. Now I want to show you a new kind of selector, because we want to change this author image here, but you know, I don't feel like creating a new class just for this image. And if I format all the image at the same time, then the other image, like this one here, will also be affected. So there's a way to actually just select this image without giving it a class name. And that's what I'm going to do here in the style file. So I write author box because this is the box where this image is inside. Author box. And then I just write img. And what this does is to select not all the images on the entire website, but only the images inside of the author box. So I don't need to make a whole new class just for that image. It's a much easier way. So and what I want now is to maybe make it a little smaller. So I will say height 100 pixels, and since it's a square, I can make width also 100 pixels. Here it is. Now let's make it round. You probably have seen those round images all over the internet, and I will just show you how to do that. And it's really easy. We just have to specify the border radius. Border radius. And if we say we want this to be 50%, then this is what happens. The image is just a circle. Now, another thing that we should probably do is to put this text here right beside this image. So, you know, this doesn't look so good. And to do that, we will again use the float property. So we say these two elements should float left, which will make this element appear first, right where it is now, and then this element should go right here. So let's just do that. Say float left for this image, and also for the author text, which is this class right here. So float also left. Alright, here we go. Now, using some margin, we can actually put it where we want. So just specify some top margin until it is here in the middle where we want it. We just have to try what works here. Margin top, I have no idea, maybe 15 pixels. And then just a margin to the left side, so that there's a little space between the image and the text. Margin left, let's say 10 pixels. Okay, 15 pixels was not quite enough. Maybe 25 pixels. So margin top could be 25. Yeah, almost there. Let's try it with 30 pixels. And that's it. That looks great, I think. So the last thing could be to maybe make this image here a little smaller and put it right here after this paragraph in the HTML is amazing section. So let's do that. It's very easy. Just cut the image, get rid of this white space, and paste it down here after this paragraph, such as we wanted. This image. Alright, so if you remember, as we did it before with this author image, I will now use the same type of selector to select this image. This is inside the blog post div, so I will just write blog post image. So it's the same situation as we had here with the image inside the author box. Now just let's say we want it to be 150 pixels high. And now to maintain the aspect ratio of the image, let's put the width to auto. Okay, very well. Alright, this web page maybe does not look perfect now, but wow, you've learned such a lot in all the lectures of this section, and that's what actually matters. We used margins and paddings, we defined width and used float and clear, and created a nice gray border, and even learned a new useful selector. So that's a lot of new stuff. And there's actually only one more thing I want to show you in this CSS section, which is element positioning. We're now going to talk about element positioning. So far, all our elements were relative positioned elements. That means that their position on the web page is determined by other elements. Now, elements with absolute position can be positioned anywhere we want inside their parent elements. But I guess I better show you how it works, right? Now, back to our web page. Suppose we wanted to know which date this article was written. In order to do that, we can position a date, let's say in this location here. And the easiest way to do that is probably with absolute positioning. But let's first start by create a little paragraph where we could write that date. I will write that right after the main heading for now, but don't worry, we will position it then later. So it will be a paragraph, and I will call it just date. And let's say March 11th, 2015. So, how does it look? Not quite as we want it, right? So let's format it to put it exactly where we want it. So back to the CSS, down here I will add a date class, as you already know how to do. Now the first thing we need to do is to ensure that the parent element is a relative positioned element. In this case, the parent of this P element is this blog post div. So let's edit it and say that its position is relative. Alright, now we can format this class here. So date has position absolute and not relative. And now, to put it exactly where we want it, we just say top 0, which means that it's right at the top with 0 pixels between the top and the element, and right also 0, which means that there is no distance between the right side of the parent container and the element. And there it is in the top right corner, just as we said. Now it's not quite where we want it yet, right? So you remember this padding between this box and this was 30 pixels, right? So what we can do is to say that this element should have 30 pixels to the right side, which will move it all the way to this place here. And now it also seems a little bit too much at the top, so we can say that there should be a distance of 10 pixels. So back in the CSS, the top is now 10 pixels and the right, let's say 30 pixels. And there it is, exactly as we wanted. Alright, so this is absolute positioning. It's very easy and very straightforward. We just have to ensure that the parent element is relative and that the absolute element has the position property set to absolute. As always, more on that later when we will be working on our big website project. Hello back. Before we move on to the next section, I want to show you a very important tool for every web developer, the Google Chrome Developer Tools. These powerful tools are built right into Google Chrome and can be used to analyze and correct HTML and CSS code, to optimize our web page, and so much more. Also, remember what I told you earlier about learning about other web pages? Here is the right tool to do just that. So let's see how we can use the Chrome Developer Tools. Actually, if I just open the Developer Tools in the window which has a live connection with brackets, which is exactly this one, that connection will get lost. That is pretty annoying, but instead I can open the HTML file in the usual way and then none of that will happen. So I'll just open the folder and here are all the files we created so far, and I will open this with Google Chrome. Right, here we go. Now the Google Chrome developer tools are all about inspecting elements. So if we right click here on this main heading H1 element and hit inspect element, we see the Chrome tools down here. And this is the H1 element I just selected. So here we have all the HTML code, and as we hover the different elements, you see that in Google Chrome it shows us which element we are inspecting. And on the right side we have all the CSS properties, and we can turn these off and on to see what happens if these properties are active or not active. And we can actually change some things. Say we want this 45 or 48 or 60, just to see how it looks like. Of course, none of these changes will be reflected in the actual code, which means if I just refresh this page, it looks exactly as it looked before. Another useful thing is when I have this selected, you see that the H1 element has this blue area, which is the content. Remember the box model? So the blue is the content, and the orange one is the margin. So that orange is these 20 pixels margin bottom, right? And this is the blog post div, and if you remember, we set a right padding to 30 pixels, and that 30 pixels is that green area we see. So this can be pretty useful, and actually we have the box model also down here. So when we have a bigger web page, this can be pretty useful to inspect all our elements. So this is our web page. Now remember, we can also do the same thing with other websites to see how they work. This is the Square website that I used before in some design lectures. Imagine you want to know how this button here works. So I will do inspect element, and then I have the code, the HTML code, and here on the right side we can see the HTML attributes. So the color, the background color. So these strike through here means that this property is not active. It means that it has been overwritten by something else. So this is the background color. We can turn it off and on and see what happens. And what else is here? So this is the margin. We can turn it off and on as well. And here we see, for example, that this button uses a border radius of 3 pixels. If you were just curious how this was designed. And the font family is square market, and the font size is 11 pixels. So you see, this is pretty useful to find out about anything that you want to know about other web pages. For example, inspect this element. Here you see, you can inspect all the HTML code. So they have different divs here, and then this H3 with this particular color. And you know, I use this a lot to see what other websites are doing right. Okay, this was just a very basic introduction, but we will see more applications of the developer tools later on. And this was actually the last lecture in the introductory CSS section. Wow, you learned such a lot so far. Congratulations. And I'm really happy and grateful that you're still with me on this journey. You're good to go for our killer website project that we will start in a moment. But wait, first I have another nice little quiz for you again. Good luck with that, and see you in the next section.